Minister, the Budget Scrutiny Committee, of which I'm a member, today launched a report on Section 481, the tax film credit, which at the moment is running about €100 million a year to film production companies in this country to make movies, something we all want to see happen. But the report also is suggesting that continued or increased investment in this area need to be dependent on vindicating the rights of performers and writers under the Copyright Directive to their intellectual property rights and the revenues that flow from it, and that crew must have their rights, particularly under fixed-term workers legislation, fully vindicated, which currently they are not.
Thank you very much, Deputy Boyd Barrett. I am aware of the Oireachtas Committee on Budgetary Oversight's recent examination of the Section 481 film tax credit, and I do understand a report was published today. As I said to you earlier, when I checked online mid-afternoon it wasn't there, but I will read the report and I compliment the committee for undertaking this work. In relation to the intellectual property rights of performers, I would note that copyright law falls within the remit of the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Notwithstanding this, my officials have engaged with the stakeholders concerned, including representative bodies for actors and performers, to gain an understanding of the issue. Copyright is relevant for many workers in the film sector, including authors, producers and broadcasters, in addition to actors, and I've been informed that Screen Ireland has engaged an independent facilitator to meet with key stakeholders to understand the various perspectives of those concerned. Individual stakeholder meetings have been held over the past 8 weeks, and the next phase will progress to group discussions, and I look forward to the outputs from this process. In relation to employment rights, the Deputy will be aware that changes were made to the film tax credit to reinforce the requirement to adhere to employment rights legislation. As part of the cultural certification process, an applicant company is required to submit an undertaking of compliance with all relevant employment legislation. This commits applicants to compliance with all relevant employment legislation in relation to the film being certified. These conditions are to be met not just by the producer company, but also by the designated activity company for each production. In relation to any specific workplace disputes, the WRC and the Labour Court are the organs of the state tasked with the resolution of such matters. It is appropriate that any relevant claims should be referred to these bodies for adjudication. I'm also aware that significant progress has been made through the introduction of new collective bargaining agreements in the sector, and my officials will continue to monitor progress in this space.
Sir, you see, the problem is the conditions are not being met. Okay, so if you take Equities, the motion that was passed at their recent AGM, what they're calling on the government is they're calling on the government to add SI number 19 of 219 film regulations under Schedule 1 information to support an application to the Minister for a certificate under Section 481 of the Act of 1997 that any such application must engage all performers, authors and contracts that comply with the letter and intent of the Copyright and Relevant Act 2000, and I won't quote it all, but and the directive. Okay? That's not happening. The producer companies are, the vast majority of cases, forcing them to sign buyout contracts where they have to sign away their rights to future royalties on their intellectual property. I'll get on to the issues for the film crew in my next opportunity, but it's not happening. And what our report is saying is it must be a condition of continued or increased funding for the film producers.
Thank you, Deputy. And I do want to acknowledge that you have been consistently raising this and related issues, and I am happy to pick up on the work that my predecessor, Minister Donoghue, did with you in relation to these issues. And I know Minister Carol McNeill has met with Screen Producers Ireland as well and visited the Ardmore studio and will, I'm sure, assist in trying to bring about a resolution to these issues. I mean, Section 481 is a valuable tax relief. It is a sector that has performed really well. We want to make sure that any changes that we consider do not undermine the attractiveness competitiveness of this sector in Ireland. But of course we have to ensure that all of those who are directly involved in production and all of the professionals that you refer to are treated fairly and are protected in every possible respect. I mean, it should be acknowledged that there has been positive progress in relation to negotiations between employer and worker representatives in the audiovisual sector in recent years. You're well familiar with the modernised crew agreement agreed and introduced in January 2021, and last year Screen Producers Ireland and the ICTU Film Construction Group of Unions secured a construction crew agreement, and I'll come back on the copyright issue in the subsequent reply.
Minister, to put it simply in the short time available, the producers are happy enough with the status quo. They make the actors and performers and writers sign buyout contracts, okay? But that's not good for the actors and performers. Similarly, the Fixed Term Workers Directive and legislation is very clear. You cannot abuse the successive use of fixed-term contracts. That workers who work on several of these acquire, by law, contracts of indefinite duration. In other words, their service, having worked across multiple productions, has to be legally acknowledged that they are employees. But the producers are refusing to do that, and they're hiding behind the DAC, even though it's the producer company who gets the money. Okay? And that means the clock goes back to zero for every crew member after each production. It's as if they've never worked in the industry. Even if they worked in the industry for 20 years, they have no rights after each production. They may or may not be re-employed. That's an abuse of the directive, as are the forcing the performers to sign away their intellectual property rights and royalties.
Thank you, Deputy. And the commitment that I'll give to you is that I will certainly read the Budgetary Oversight Committee report, and I'm happy to engage with you and the sector to try to make further progress in relation to these issues, within the constraints that I have to live within as well, and recognising that copyright law does not fall within the Department of Finance. As you know, it is within the remit of enterprise, trade and employment, and the EU copyright and related rights in the Digital Single Market Regulations 2021 were signed into law by the then Taoiseach, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment in November 2021.
Partly down to your department, the actual issuing of the cert.
Yeah, so more than happy to engage with Deputy Boyd Barrett. I acknowledge you have a track record in raising these issues. From my reading of it in preparation for this question, it seems that there has been considerable progress. There has been goodwill, and a lot of work has been done by my predecessor and the industry to make progress, and we'll see if we can continue with that work here, to see if more progress can be made.
Thanks, Minister.
We'll go to the next question.